New Cupid. Time for a change. He's giving you the news. You wanna die to understand. That's what you gotta do. 360. Carol, get your shit together, Carol.
We chose the tennis serve as our skill because the success of a tennis serve is greatly affected by the technique a player uses. Also, the biomechanics plays a large role in the action of a tennis serve. Where the ball lands on the opposite side of the court and ball velocity are both crucial in tennis, and they both rely on efficient technique of the serve. In addition, sports injuries usually have a mechanical cause. Thus, by studying the biomechanics of a tennis serve, one can reduce the risk of possible injury. Since all tennis players are unique in their form, by studying the biomechanics of a tennis serve, individualized approaches to improving one's swing can also be made.
News down, do your dance, we got a brand new dance. Down, do your dance,
A crucial phase in a tennis serve is the forward swing or acceleration stage. During this phase, a player's weight should be shifted to their back foot while dorsiflexing their front foot. From this position, the player shifts their weight to their front foot, and while swinging their racket through, they should flex their wrist, holding the racket and have an anterior tilt. Many muscles are used during the acceleration phase of a tennis swing. A player's abdominal, upper body, and lower body muscles are all engaged. Specifically, the rotator cuff and forearm muscles are of greatest use during this phase. The acceleration phase occurs in the sagittal and coronal planes. The shoulder and elbow of the arm holding the racket is extending in the sagittal plane, while the wrist is slightly extended in the sagittal plane. The trunk is slightly flexed or anteriorly tilted in the coronal plane. During a tennis serve, it is also crucial to have good hand-eye coordination to allow adequate timing to hit the ball at the right moment and give it the best angle of projection. The shoulder, elbow, wrist, and trunk are the main joint actions during the acceleration phase. The shoulder is extended to hyperextended, the elbow is extended, the wrist is hyperextended and slightly ulnar deviated. The trunk is laterally flexed to the side opposite the racket.
I say no, they say what you doing, trying to do somebody go. I just let the music come from my soul, so all of my people can stay on.
The first step of the tennis serve is the preparation. This is the routine that each player forms for theirself, which they perform before each serve. A right-handed player will start with their left foot parallel to the baseline and their right foot pointed diagonally towards the net post. Most players also bounce the ball a couple times before starting the serve. When the ball is bounced, the ball deforms when it hits the ground. The energy required to return the ball to its original shape is referred to as strain energy. This bounce demonstrates the coefficient of restitution resulting in the higher bounce back. The tighter the grip of the racket, the larger coefficient as well. The grip you exert on the racket is also exerted on your hand as stated by Newton's third law. The B-movie portrays the amount of deformation on the ball and the strain energy needed to bring the ball back to its original shape.
It smells good. Not like a flower, but I like it. Yeah, fuzzy, chemically. Careful, guys. It's a little grabby. Oh, sweet Lord of beef. Hey, Candy Brain, get out there! Problem? Guys! This could be bad. Affirmative. Very close. That hurt. Promise, little boy, you are way out of position, rookie. Like a missile. Right?
Step 2 of the tennis serve is the backswing. 4 biomechanical terms are shown during this movement, the first of them being Newton's first law of motion. This law states that a body in motion will stay in motion unless acted upon by an external force. When the ball is tossed in the air, it leaves the hand with a certain velocity. As the ball goes up, its velocity decreases because of undergoing a negative acceleration due to gravity. When the ball is thrown from the hand, the biomechanical term of trajectory is seen as well. This is influenced by the angle of projection, projection speed, and relative height of projection. In order to achieve a greater result in where the ball is hit, the projection velocity must be perfected. The final terms that are included are kinetic and potential energy. While moving in the air, the ball has kinetic energy, and while it is in your hand and the apex of projection, it has potential energy. At the peak, or apex, vertical velocity is 0, therefore having potential energy. Then speed increases again on the way down, gaining a more positive acceleration due to gravity.
The third phase in a tennis serve is the forward swing or the acceleration phase. In this phase, the server's arm accelerates forward and the racket makes contact with the ball. When the ball is hit, it is now a projectile, with only the forces of air resistance and gravity acting on it. The ball follows a projectile motion traveling in a curvilinear path. There are 3 factors that will influence the ball's trajectory, or the flight path: projection angle, projection speed, and relative height of projection. The projection angle will affect the shape of the ball's trajectory. A parabolic shape is desired in a tennis serve, with the optimal projection angle somewhere between 45 and 65 degrees. Projection speed, or ball speed, is also very important as this will determine the length of the trajectory. During a tennis serve, one wants to maximize the projection speed in order to get the largest range or horizontal displacement. Finally, the relative projection height will influence the tennis ball's flight time. The greater the height, the longer the flight time, and the greater the horizontal displacement of the ball. As relative projection height increases, optimum angle of projection decreases, and vice versa, so this factor varies for each individual tennis player. Overall, the primary goal of the tennis player during a serve should be to maximize the speed of projection. Newton's second law can also be applied to the forward swing or acceleration phase of a tennis serve. A large force from the server is applied to the small mass of a tennis ball. According to Newton's second law, force equals mass times acceleration, and thus the tennis ball will travel with a large acceleration. Linear and angular kinematics are also important in this phase. First, the shoulder acts as the axis of rotation, with the arm moving through an angular distance of about 90 degrees. The arm also has angular acceleration, which can be found by dividing the change in angular velocity by the change in time. During the serve, the goal should be to maximize angular acceleration of the arm to impart the largest force to the ball. Second, after the ball has been struck, it possesses linear velocity. This velocity can be found by dividing the change in position or displacement by the change in time. A maximal velocity is desired in tennis so that the opponent has a shorter time to react to the ball. If all other factors are held constant, the greater the radius of rotation at which the racket hits the ball, the greater the linear velocity that will be imparted to the ball. Finally, the linear displacement of the ball is important and can be found by looking at the initial and final position of the ball. Precise timing of the racket and ball contact is important to accurately hit the ball to the other side of the court. During the forward swing phase, it is also important to consider momentum and impulse. Momentum can be defined as a quantity of motion measured as the product of a tennis ball's mass and its velocity. Impulse is defined as the change in momentum. When the racket makes contact with the ball, a large force acts over a short period of time, thus creating a large change in the ball's momentum. The racket and ball collision can be defined as a perfectly elastic impact. During this impact, a majority of the velocity of the racket and ball system is conserved, and the coefficient of restitution is close to 1. Grip on the racket, racket size and shape, balance, flexibility, string type and tension, and swing kinematics all influence the coefficient of restitution. Strain energy can also be considered in this phase when the ball and racket make contact. During this phase, there is also both potential and kinetic energy. The ball has potential energy when it is held in the server's hand. Potential energy can be found by multiplying mass by acceleration of gravity and height. In addition, the ball has kinetic energy when it is being hit and it is in motion. The kinetic energy can be found by multiplying 1/2 by mass times velocity squared.
Lastly, the final stage is follow-through. This step is also known as deceleration since the body is slowing down from its motion in the serve. Shifting of the center of gravity occurs, which allows the server to transfer energy and momentum from their body mass into the serve. This will ultimately increase the ball speed. Converting the angular momentum produced into forward linear momentum will allow a player to be ready for the ball to be returned to them.
This is a slow motion of Serena Williams performing her serve. Step 2 is clearly shown with her backswing. She tosses the ball up with her left arm and brings her right arm backwards. Her left arm stays up in the air while her right arm is getting ready to make contact with the ball. In step 3, Serena has her arm fully extended and hits the ball at maximum height. She increases her height by jumping up and forwards. She hits the ball at an angle which causes the ball to accelerate in a curvilinear motion. You can see step 4 with her follow-through. Notice how she lands inside the baseline because of the inertia she produces. Her arm decelerates across her body. Here's a sports science video of the coefficient of restitution. It will help you with our practice problem to follow.
There are 3 different surfaces on which tennis majors are played. Grass at Wimbledon, red clay at the French Open, and hard court at the Australian and US Opens. We recreated each surface here in the Sports Science Lab to examine the critical differences and how they affect play. First, the coefficient of restitution. This is a measure of a surface's elasticity or bounce. Clay courts have relatively little give, so very little energy is lost upon impact, while the ryegrass courts of Wimbledon act like a cushion, dissipating a higher percentage of the ball's energy. A ball dropped from 6 feet above clay normally bounces about 4 feet 4 inches, roughly 6 inches higher than a hard court bounce, and about a foot higher than a grass bounce. Next, the coefficient of friction. The grittiness of clay acts like sandpaper, grabbing the ball's fuzz and slowing velocity by about 40%. Grass, on the other hand, is slick. Balls literally skid across the grass blades, losing roughly 30% of their speed. Hard courts are in between, reducing ball velocity anywhere from 32 to 35%. But what does all this mean for a player? All things being equal, a 120-mile-per-hour serve on grass will come off the bounce about 8 miles per hour faster than clay, thanks to lower friction, and 7 degrees lower than clay because of lower restitution, reaching the opposite player 0.05 of a second sooner. That might not sound like much, but it's 17% less time after the bounce for the player to react. There's one area where hard courts blow past clay and grass: heat retention. Temperatures on some hard courts have been measured up to nearly 150 degrees. One reason the US Open is one of the hottest tournaments of the year. For ESPN Sports Science, I'm John Brinkus.
Now here's a practice problem regarding coefficient of restitution.
You're young or you're old. Here we go. We gon' show you how it goes. To the right, to the right, to the right, to the right, to the left, to the left, to the left, to the left. Now kick, now kick, now kick, now kick. Now walk it by yourself. Now walk it by yourself. Let me see you do the Cupid.
Did you get it right? To get the right answer, you take the bounce height divided by the drop height and then the square root. The answer to problem number 1 is 0.678, and the answer to number 2 is 0.274. Next, we will compare elite versus amateur tennis players.
Comes. Oh, he's trying to kill me. You're good at this. Now, when you asked me to play, I thought you'd done this before. No, Johnny McEnroe said it was wicked easy. Plus, it was my uncle's favorite game, right?
How'd you know that?
I read it in his diary.
Really? I didn't know he kept a diary.
Sorry about that, dude.
The elite tennis player will hold their racket in a special grip designed for the serve. This grip is called the continental grip. Amateur players don't usually have a set routine at the beginning of their serve, like an elite performer will.
Elite tennis players differ themselves from amateurs by having a larger backswing, flexing their elbows behind their head, and using their legs to force themselves upward.
During the forward swing or acceleration phase, amateur performers will not snap their wrist as efficiently as elite performers will. Wrist flexion and extension and radial and ulnar deviation are used to create the snapping of the wrist. If these muscles were not trained, like in amateur athletes, the wrist can become sprained. This training can also help strengthen the forearm and the elbow tendons. Elite performers will jump a little bit while making contact with the ball. This creates a larger downward force on the ball, which makes the ball travel faster. Elite performers will also have a greater acceleration of their arm, just from the increase in the strength of their rotator cuff muscles. A lack of strength in the rotator cuff muscles may present an issue when serving because of the excessive use of these muscles. This could lead to a tear or strain in the shoulder muscles. Expert players not only strike the ball with the arm fully extended, but also quickly rotate the body in the transverse plane, making the spine the axis of rotation and maximizing the length of the anatomical lever delivering the force.
Elite performers can generally produce more inertia and acceleration during the serve due to increased levels of training. Also, the angular velocity that is generated from the hips and core to rotate the body to the net is greater in elite tennis players. On the other hand, amateur tennis players do not tend to finish at their full potential because they are not able to generate the force needed to complete the serve. Likewise, their angular velocity produced tends to be lower, resulting in a weaker serve.
Here are some corrections that tennis players can use in order to improve their serve. Make sure that your knees are bent to get maximal acceleration. Elbow flexion behind the head during stage 2, or the backswing, is important for the increase in acceleration of the serve. During the swing, the server must accelerate up and forward for the ball to travel down and fast into the opposite court. For the different types of serve, flat, slice, and kicker, the toss placement will vary a little. The kicker serve is hit right above the server's head, so the toss will be further back than the flat serve. The ball is hit on the top, which creates topspin on the ball, making the ball bounce higher when it lands on the other side of the net. The slice serve toss should be a little further to one side than the flat serve, so the racket can hit the ball on the side, creating a spin on the ball that will deflect the ball at more of an angle when it hits the ground. Common injuries in tennis are shin splints, tennis elbow, ankle sprains, rotator cuff tendonitis, and anterior knee pain. The lower limb injuries are from the forces resulting from sprinting, stopping, and pivoting during tennis. Upper limb injuries are due to the high velocity and repetitive arm movements. Rotator cuff injuries are primarily from the rotation of the shoulder during a serve. The excessive gripping of a racket can cause tennis elbow to occur, which is injury to the forearm muscles that extend the wrist and the fingers.
We gotta